Today's lesson is on square roots, so what I want you to do is first of all find the area of the following squares. To get the area of a square, it works like a rectangle, length times width, but the length and the width are the same, so it's actually the side times the side. So 5 times 5 would be 25, 7 times 7 would be 49, 9 times 9 would be 81. To do this, we actually multiplied the number by itself, 5 times 5, 7 times 7. This is called squaring. We can use a 2 as an exponent on a number to show that we are squaring the number. So 2 squared means I'm doing 2 times 2, which is 4. 5 squared meant that I was doing 5 times 5, which is 25. 7 squared meant that I did 7 times 7, which is 49. Make sure you're multiplying the number by itself, not 7 times 2 and not 5 by 5. So what I want you to do is think about the side length of these squares. So we're going to actually do this a little differently, and I'm going to go to a piece of graph paper. And first thing I'm going to do is draw what is going to be a 2 by 2 square. And the area of this square would be a 4. If I were to draw a 3 by 3 square, the area of this would be 9. And if I were to draw a 4 by a 4 square, the area of this would be 16. What we just did was squaring the 2 to get this number inside here. But what we can do is another operation that's called the square root. And the square root of a number says, okay, you have the area of a square, which is 4. What is the length of the sides? The area of the square is 9. What's the length of the sides? The area is 16. What's the length of the sides? So in this case, the square root of 4 is actually equal to 2, because a 2 times a 2 would give you that 4. The square root of 9 is equal to 3, because 3 times 3 gives you 9. The square root of 16 is 4, because each of the sides are 4. Because these numbers all make up a very perfect square, we actually call these numbers 2, 3, 4, or 4, 9, and 16, and so on, perfect squares, because they actually are the area of perfect squares. So that's what we do. If I asked you to do the square root of 51, you wouldn't be able to draw a perfect square that has an area of 51, because there's no specific and easy whole number times itself that would give you 51. So going back to your notes page, area is 16, what would the sides be? Well, this would be a 4 by a 4 square. If the area is 9, this would be a 3 by 3. So this is called taking the square root. We use this symbol for the square root, which we just saw, and this says, can you find the square root of 49? So you're thinking, what number times itself gives you 49? And if you're thinking 7, that's correct, because 7 times 7 is 49. The other thing that we can do with our squares is if it's not a perfect square, we can actually estimate it. So we have this list of the perfect squares here. 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, and so on. Those are all perfect squares. So for this first one, the square root of 45, if I were to put this in on this list, the square root of 45 would actually fall here because it's between the square root of 36 and the square root of 49. In order for us to estimate this, we would need to know that the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of 49 is 7. Using this chart, that helps us to find the square roots pretty easily. This tells me that the square root of 45 is somewhere between 6 and 7. If I were to do the square root of 68, you should notice it's going to go right in here, in between 64 and 81. So it's between the square root of 64 and 81. The square root of 64 is 8, and the square root of 81 is 9. So the square root of 68 is between 8 and 9. If we were to do 102, you're going to notice that's going to go right in here. It falls between the square root of 100 and 121. The square root of 100 is 10, and 121 is 11. That tells me that this is going to be somewhere between the numbers 10 and 11. If I had to look, if I were going to actually pretend this was a number line from 100 right here down to 121 right here, 102 would actually be right up here, pretty close. Okay? This, remember, is 10, and this is really the 11. So it would be much closer to 10, but it has to be bigger than 10. So I'm going to say it's going to be closer to 10, maybe 10.1, or maybe even 10.2. But 10.1 would be a good estimate. On your calculator, you can actually go in and check this. You have a square root button right here, so you can press it. And then we're going to type in 102 and hit the equals button. If you look, we get 10.099. So if I were to round that 10 point, the first number, the 9 will bump that up to a 1. So 10.1 is a pretty good estimate.